What's up guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. This video is a little bit of an update about the tank that's behind me. About a month ago, I showed off this tank in a relatively unattractive light, to say the least. It was covered in hair algae and definitely was going through that ugly phase where a lot of nutrients are leaching out of the rocks. And despite having basically zero nitrate, zero phosphate, zero issues of any other kind, a lot, and I mean a lot of hair algae had taken hold. Number one rule is do not panic when this sort of stuff happens, especially if it's a new tank. A lot of times just the aging of the tank itself is what's necessary. So trying to hurry along a solution, it's really not going to do you a whole lot of good. But there are ways to be proactive. So I wanted to show off the results of what it might look like if you were going to be a little bit more proactive. The first thing that we wanted to do was to get a lot more herbivores into the system. We started that by putting in a lot of the fish, a lot of the tangs, the fox faces, but the real big hitters when it comes to algae control are snails. My favorite snail is probably a trochus, but if you've been on this channel a little while, you'll know that we have a long, sordid history with trochuses. Basically, by far my favorite snail, they can flip themselves over. They do a really, really good job on the algae. They seem to be more active than other types of snails, but the only problem is they don't ship particularly well. So we just can't get in like a big shipment of trochus snails and have them do the job. Also, they breed in captivity for everybody else that's not Tidal Gardens, because for all the years that we've had trochuses, they pretty much just stay in that same number in everybody else's tank. I'm sure that the comments below are going to get flooded with comments about, oh yeah, I just had a trochus spawning event and now I have 100. That has never been my experience, unfortunately. Our next favorite snail are the astrias from down in like the Florida area. We can get those in large number, and the reason why it took this tank a little bit longer to get situated is because we go through a process of quarantining our inverts. We actually go through and scrub their shells, put them into a quarantine tank so they can kind of like poop out whatever it was that they've been eating in whatever conditions they were in, kind of getting their system all flushed out, because they can hold water from wherever they used to be for about 3-4 days even. So we want to make sure that they're kind of clean as far as that goes. And again, brush off their shells before getting them into here. And we need so many for this tank. It's roughly 600 gallons with a lot of hair algae. That process takes a little bit longer. Now that we do have hundreds of snails in there doing work, the rocks are noticeably more polished since they were in the last video. Once the algae gets to a certain thickness, pretty much fish and snails aren't going to be able to do the job that well. Fish especially like to eat the algae when it's barely like a small little fuzz, and they kind of just like to graze at the new growth. Similarly, snails would rather polish up an already managed surface, not so much a giant field of 4-inch long hair algae. What we have to do on our end is to remove as much of that algae as possible. The best way that I've found to do that is to actively siphon as you're trying to dislodge all that algae. It's really tempting to go through and just like scrub the rocks, and wherever that algae ends up, hey, it's better than in your show tank, right? Ideally though, you would incorporate some type of active siphoning. What we've come up with are two little things that tend to help. One is a siphon attached to a toothbrush, and the other is a siphon attached to a flat blade scraper. We're essentially using the water as a vehicle to remove as much of the hair algae as possible. So we're doing like probably the most proactive water change imaginable. Once we're done scrubbing the rocks and blading off algae from all the flat surfaces, that really gives your herbivores a chance to really get in there and control things. And that's really what we're after here, because long term, I am not going to be doing this. It's going to have to take care of itself. But just to give the herbivores a chance to get in there to do that work is really all that we're looking for. And as long as the tank is trending in the right direction of the algae every single day, getting a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less, that's what we're going for here. We've gotten to the point where we are able to plant some SPS in here. We wanted to start off with just a few little bits and pieces, nothing too crazy. I don't want to just throw in like several large colonies of homewrecker or Walt Disney or anything crazy like that in here. So just some experimental stuff, maybe a purple bonsai, maybe a green slimer, that sort of thing, just to get things going, and we can monitor it. Now, as far as next steps, aging the tank itself will help a lot. But there's one thing about this tank that I was always not super duper happy with, was the clarity of the water. New systems kind of go through this. It goes through a little bit of a cloudy, hazy phase. But I was just thinking back to my friend Nathan's tank and just how crystal clear that water looked. It looked like there wasn't water in there at all. It looked like the fish were just floating there. And I really, really like that extra crystal sparkling water look. The big difference that what he does in his tanks versus what we do here is that he uses filter socks, he uses ultraviolet, and he uses activated carbon. So what we're going to be doing as far as next steps go, we're probably going to skip the filter sock thing because realistically for a home aquarium, it's cool. You can just manage that every other day. But here at a coral farm, it's just going to be prone to neglect. There's so many systems here that the idea of changing out a lot of filter socks realistically probably isn't going to happen. We're going to focus a little bit more on the UV sterilization aspect as well as the activated carbon thing. Now, funny story about our little adventures with ultraviolet. I have 3 different UV units that aren't working. One of them was a large commercial unit that's pond size. It's like got 4 55-watt tubes and everything like that, and it's very old. I'm gonna guess it's maybe 15 years old, and it's finally hit that wall where the electronics are starting to fail and everything like that. And I know it's the electronics because we've switched out the bulbs multiple times. It's not the bulbs. It's definitely the UV ballasts and everything like that. So the electronics are getting faulty. Then the other 2 are smaller units, and for a system of this size, it might not be super effective because I'm not really talking about just 600 gallons. This is a part of a 2,500 gallon system, give or take. So the idea of any kind of like hobbyist sized unit probably isn't going to do a lot. But I have these 2 units, hobbyist sized, better than nothing, right? Except for the fact that both of them, out of the box, brand new, were broken. I had to go get replacement quartz sleeves that had shattered, replace all that, then get these things fired up. Hopefully between some activated carbon and ultraviolet, we'll be able to polish up this water just a little bit, even if the UV aspect of it is undersized. The thing that I'm really interested in trying, but too scared to, is ozone. I've got a great contact to get like a commercial ozone unit and everything. The only problem is I've never used ozone before. There's probably, who knows how much value in corals there are in the farming side of this system. That's kind of the story of this whole place. To do an experiment really puts a lot at risk. We don't have a ton of really small tanks just to practice stuff on. Everything was really, really big. I'm sure that we could probably do it just fine, but I don't want to put all of this at risk. For the time being, we're just going to see how far activated carbon takes us. One other thing that I'm going to mention is there's one fish that we had to remove out of the 600-gallon tank. And boy, let me tell you, it's fun to try to catch a fish once there's already rock and everything like that in there. It was this magnificent foxface. He was the one that over in the greenhouse was super mild temperament, always hiding underneath a shelf, really kept to himself. When we put him into this other tank, we were pretty happy that he was boisterous, he's way out in front, and like, awesome. Beautiful fish, out in the open all the time, couldn't be happier. Then he had another personality change, where in about a week, he turned into a homicidal axe murderer and was trying to kill everything. basically, we were noticing that some of the larger fish, especially, he went after the big fish. He didn't try to like pick on a little yellow tang. He was picking on the biggest fox face in there, to the point where we were pretty sure if we didn't separate them entirely, that that big fox face was going to jump out and kill itself. It was that bad. It was very, very aggressive. So he is in timeout. He has his own little tank all to himself. Little meaning 250 gallons, but we need to find a different home for him entirely, because that was unexpected and we just can't have that here. There's one other thing that I think that I would like to try before setting up any more tanks with this type of rock. I've heard a lot of folks having some success with giving all of these a nice long bath in muriatic acid. And I heard that you'll lose a significant portion of the volume of the rock, maybe like between 5 to 10% of the weight, perhaps. By doing that kind of acid dip, it really pulls out a lot of the potential algae growing pollutants that reside in there. Now, I've never done that, and I don't even know if I want to make a video on that, because muriatic acid is kind of unsafe, and I wouldn't want to just kind of put that out into the world as far as like, oh, this is how we did it, because might want to keep that to ourselves. But that's something that I would like to try. Dealing with algae issues, if it's preventable entirely, it's probably better. All right, guys, that pretty much does it from this update. Hopefully by the next time we take a look at this tank, it'll have a lot more coral in it, a lot less algae in it, because we still do have some algae. It's not horrific, but it's still there, and it's still going to be a process for the next couple months, I'm going to guess, before it's absolutely crystal clear. All right, guys, that is it from here. I hope you all enjoyed the update, and I will see you all next time. Happy reefing.